So I'm in Ipswich in Suffolk, and Keith and I met about 20 years ago at a workshop that Keith did for for some trainees, of which I was one of those, and we had a great day. And I love integrating adults, so it's great to be doing a workshop with Keith, with you guys. I'm educational TA, so I do, my focus for TA is co-creative TA and supporting adults to learn.
So I will, as I'm speaking from and then in this land, I will open up in the first language of this land, and I'll translate afterwards. So I will say, ena mana, ena matawaka, ena reo, ena rangatira ma, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nā mihi ki a koe, Paul. Nā mihi ki a koutou, nā mihi o te rā, nā mihi o nā whare, kei te whenua o te kaweroa maki maua kaianga naenei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So what I've acknowledged is greeted you and acknowledged your the journeys that you have taken to get here, your languages, your authority and your leadership. And I've also acknowledged the day and the land and the tribe on whose ancestral lands my house sits. And literally sits, it's about sort of a foot off the ground. So I feel very grounded here. That's the short version. I also do a longer version where I acknowledge some of my geographical connections to the Lake District and to England and also to Wales, because I have Welsh heritage. A name like Tudor has to be Welsh. Yeah, I guess I'm the sort of partly responsible for the integrating adult, or sort of resurrecting the idea of integrating adult. And I was delighted to meet you, Paul. I think you were one of the first people who really sort of got onto it. And I actually think I was probably still writing the chapter that came out in 2003, because I think that workshop was 2002-ish. And I can tell you a little bit of the story of how I got from co-creative TA, the Summers and Tudor 2000 to Tudor 2003. But it doesn't feel like it's my concept. It comes from, people like Muriel James and Youngwood and Erskine and others, with some adaptation. But yeah, I'm always love to be here with my TA whānau, my extended family. So it's delightful to be here, and I know Rachel has already laid down some challenges about integrating adults and various other things, so I'm looking forward to that and to hearing from you and to reconnecting with those of you that some of you I've met, some of you I haven't. And I think what we want to do initially is basically to throw it open to you to say, what are you doing here on a Friday morning or Friday night? And what is, what's in your mind, what's in your heart about this? What do you like about it? What are you skeptical about? Really, to set the agenda or to co-create the agenda. I think that's what we're going to do, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, I think so. We did have a plan, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the plan.
So we don't fight to go first.
Yeah, we're a small enough group that we can be a bit spacious, and we are. Oh, do you want to do any of the housekeeping, Paul? I was thinking you.
Okay, so you'll have picked up that we are recording it, so you should have clicked that. We've got through till 10:30 UK time, and we will normally take a quick bathroom break at some point in the middle. probably we've got a couple of ideas for some breakout rooms, a question for you to explore in a breakout. So we'll probably just wait until we get through the well, we'll call it a teachy bit, but it's a dialogue explaining integrating adults and a conversation with you, and then we'll probably invite you to go into a breakout room with others and explore something that we'll invite you to explore, and then come back, and then we'll go wherever what comes out of the breakout rooms takes us. Yeah, is that okay? And normal contracting, confidentiality, you can take anything out of the room that's not personal to anybody else. And we will want to work co-creatively with you, surprisingly enough. Yeah. So I'll tell you what, just to save all the umming and ahhing and pauses, I'll invite you in the order that you're on my screen. So Rachel will be first, and then Alan.
I was going to offer to go first anyway. I know I can't.
Oh, okay.
Seeing as my name has already been mentioned.
Oh no. Mentioned in dispatches.
Hi everybody. It's good to reconnect with some of you and see some new people. I'm Rachel Cook. I'm a teacher and supervisor of TA, and I think over the Keith is putting his thumbs up because I became a TSTA recently, and Keith was on my theory and organisation and ethics board, so we had some good conversations. Yeah, I've been finding that I've been using co-creative TA and thinking about things from the integrating adult perspective more and more over the years, and I think, you know, what one of the things that Keith is referring to is my slight gripe with him about the fact that you can't integrate or shouldn't integrate, or whatever. Keith, you'll have to correct me, but the integration of different ego state models, so the integrating adult, and particularly for me, I think a lot about Hargan and Sill's model, the development of the self, and transferential relationship, and I personally, the way I work, think about both the integrating adult and the transferential relationship, and it's combining one ego state model and a 3 ego state model, and I get that, and I think it's possible, but Keith may disagree with me. Anyway,
We're up for the disagreement.
Clearly. We are up for the disagreement. Yeah. But I know it's possible because I do it.
Well, there you go. I don't have a disagreement with that.
But I especially as a trainer and supervisor, I'm thinking much more in terms of the integrating adult and co-creativity, and finding it really inspiring working in that way. So that's why I'm here, and it's great to be here.
Just as a thanks, Rachel. Just as a maybe of interest to you, particularly from what you said, is that we're doing a workshop on transferences from a co-creative perspective in a few weeks' time.
Lovely, thank you.
Alan, and then Jane.
Hello everyone, it's good to see you all. So my name's Alan Rooney. I'm based in Edinburgh at the moment, and I'm just finishing off my first year, foundation year, in my counselling and psychotherapy course. I met Paul online in the Scottish TA conference, and he kind of sort of touched on integrating adult, and it was really helpful for me because it helped me to understand a lot more about my own sort of personal background. So I'm really here just to find out more about that, and also about the co-creative part of the TA. Is I don't really know too much about it, so I'm really just here to learn and to soak up what this is.
So thanks, Alan. It'd be good if you take some justs out. You are here to learn, you're not just here to learn. So an invitation for you, not to discount yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Jane and then Dennis.
Hi everybody, nice to see everyone. I feel I'm kind of returning to co-creativity. I kind of learned it when I was training a long time ago. I'm coming back to it. I would say I'm very much a clinician. I'm a PTSTA and I supervise and teach. But what I'm interested in is how I've been using it or think I've been using it in practice. I'm here to learn what you see as co-creation or TA and think about it and add on to what's going on in my mind. And I'm a bit with Rachel that I think that there is a way of, well, what I'm playing with at the moment is writing about end of life and opportunities for co-create. It's only a title, very early title. This is sort of, but something about end of life and early, end of life and opportunity for co-creating deconfusion of a child ego state. I don't know what, I'd be interested, that's the title so far. It could change. But anyway, interested to be with everyone and hear what people are saying.
So. Say that title again, Jane.
Okay, I mean this is obviously I'm very kind of, I feel I'm coming out or bringing you in. I think. So because I'm dyslexic, so I've never written anything, so it's really taken me out of my script. But basically, I've worked in palliative care and end of life for a long time, so I'm thinking about co-creation. Thinking about end of life is an opportunity for deconfusion the child ego state in a co-creational way.
Wow.
Sounds great.
Well, any thoughts, or you might just think, no, you're completely on a wrong track, and that's okay too. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of, I've worked and found people really change at end of life. But if you keep it adult to adult as well, it's the kind of how the relationship, I don't know, I'm full of ideas at the moment with it, but I'd be interested if anyone's got any thoughts or interests.
Great topic.
Thanks for sharing, Joe.
Yeah, amazing.
Dennis, then Monica.
Good morning, good evening, folks. My name is Dennis Doherty. I'm based in West Cumbria. I'm interested in the co-creativity side of things. I have a background in science and engineering, and always think of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which basically said, look at anything, it changes. And to me, that applies very much as soon as you're in front of a client. So things I'm interested in are the old stuff, like whose head's the client putting on you, and how much of what is generated because of the two of you together. So that's where my interest lies.
So
Sorry, I just missed the bit about something at the edges. Heisenberg's
Uncertainty principle.
Yes, and then you said something about edges.
Did I?
I thought you said something about
edge of my memory now.
it just broke up. There was a couple of words I missed anyway. Maybe not
right.
So you'll understand field theory then, Dennis.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gav, nice to have you here. Monica, then Coral.
Hey, good morning. So my name is Monica. I'm a TA trainee in my second clinical year. I'm originally from Poland, been in the UK for a very long time. But before I became TA, I have got a degree in sociology. And when I discovered that TA has got co-creative bit, I was very pleased, because back in the day, I read this fantastic book by Mr. Berger and Luckman called Social Creation of Reality, it was called, published in 1970s, I believe. And I always thought there was something missing in TA, and that's the bit that was missing. But in terms of integrating adults, I am now in focusing my training on body work. And literally, I had a very long session last night working with the body, and I thought, this is integrating adults, that being in the present, being present and being aware of the body, it was a very powerful experience, and transferential, and it was just incredible how people were very quickly accessing their script, and at the same time they were able to be in the present and notice the other. So it was fascinating to see that. What are the challenges of integrating adults? I'm very, very interested in power imbalance. And as I am a sociologist, to me, this societal parent figure is always present, is almost to me like another person in the room. I was always very aware of that society bit when we are interacting. So that's just my internal challenges to put it together. But yeah, very, very looking forward to it.
Great.
Thanks, Monica. Really interesting take. Yeah, great. Coral and then Chidel.
You're on mute, Coral. Oh.
Really? Yeah, hi everyone. Say that again as I realise that I'm on mute. Great to see some familiar faces. I'm based in Dumfries in Scotland. Did live in Cumbria for a very long time, where I trained in TA, and I'm a PTSTA. I suppose since my PTSTA over the last 8 years, I've gone away more from TA, because I work predominantly with children now, because I'm a child psychotherapist as well as an adult psychotherapist, and I use horses in the outdoors, and I love being outdoors. So I've gone more to body-based, movement-based. I still do some traditional psychotherapy, but it is outdoors in my garden in a cabin, because I find that that's good for my body and my mind. And but I loved your work. I read, the book Parent is Adult to the Child, Keith, and that's, I think, when I first came across integrated adult. So obviously I know Graham Summers' work on co-creative TA. So I feel like I'm coming back into TA because I've got more TA supervisors, and I'm thinking I really need to get up to date with my theories. And also I think that the integrated adult could apply to all the different ways that I work. If I'm doing play therapy, or if I'm working outdoors with horses, or I'm doing nature-based, I'm walking in the outdoors, I think I could apply it across all the ways that I work. So it's great to be here, and I'm nervous. I can feel my body being nervous as I speak, all of the nervous symptoms that come with being in a new group, which is also exciting. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I'm interested that both you and Jane talked about, coming back to TA, and one of the stories that I tell about co-creative TA, which is true because it was our experience, is that co-creative TA is the story of me and Graham finding our way with TA. We both gone away. I'd gone into much more the person-centered world, Graham into Gestalt, and we were both interested to become PTSTAs, and I did, he didn't, but we were sort of saying, well, we need to find a way of squaring off some things that we don't like about TA or disagree with. And so, yeah, co-creative, one view of co-creative TA is that it is the story of two guys' relationship with each other, but more profoundly, more our relationship with TA, and finding our way to sort of say, well, this is how we integrate. So that's it's pretty autobiographical, co-autobiographical. So I'm interested that that's already a theme here.
I'll reiterate what Keith said. For me, that was the same, because I couldn't get on with some aspects of TA, and co-creative TA and integrating adult just enabled me to live with TA. Thanks, Carl. Chidel and then Noel.
So hello everybody, it's good to be back again. I've really enjoyed all the workshops I've attended and those that I've watched so far. And I really enjoyed the workshops that we did at the conference. So thank you very much for that, Paul and Keith. They were great. I'm in my year 3 of my training. So I'm writing my diploma and I'm trying to figure out what kind of a psychotherapist I'm going to be. I really enjoy working in the co-creative way. I am seeing people face to face, online, and also doing walking therapy. And I'm interested in the flexibility that I'm able to bring and to use when what I believe I'm doing is co-creative. I'm still trying to figure it out. And I'm really enjoying all the learning that I'm getting. So thank you very much for that. It's great. Oh, and I should say, if anyone's trying to say my name, run at it, don't pause. If you pause, you'll start to panic in the middle. So it's just Shadell. Shadell.
Thanks, Shadell.
Thank you.
Noelle and then Laura, and then Sandra.
Hi everyone. I'm here almost for the same reasons as Rachel actually.
Sorry, Noelle, can you turn your volume up at all?
Try. Is that better?
Yeah,
That's
much
better.
better.
Yeah.
As well, the microphone is. Yeah, I'm here almost for the same reasons or similar reasons to Rachel, that my training was primarily relational from metanoia, and so Hargaard and the Sills theories played a big part, but I was really drawn to the integrating adult, and I've sort of always struggled with, are they compatible or aren't they? So I thought the best place to come and explore that was here in this environment. Unfortunately, I have to leave at 9:15 because I've got to go to work. So I will say my goodbyes probably on the chat if we're in midst of something. But I'm when I saw you were running this workshop, I was super excited because it's great to be able to have this sort of workshop, to be able to explore an idea which I'm very drawn to.
Great.
And you'll be able to go back in and you'll get the Zoom link for the recording, so you'll be able to go back in and watch it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Laura?
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Happy to be here. This is the first opportunity I've got to work with Keith and Paul, so really pleased to be here. I used Integrating Adult as part of my CTA, now a CTAP, and it makes sense to me, it speaks to me. We're always in the process of becoming, we're always in the process of integrating. And the co-creative part is, there's no me without you. It's about existing, and it's about what comes up. So I'm interested in the transference or the counter transference I think you referred to earlier, Paul. If you can put that in the chat, or if I can have some more information there. So yeah, really interested today, and lovely to be here with everyone.
You look really excited. It's lovely. Hey.
And I think it's really interesting thinking about transparencies in the present.
It's always here. If it touches me, there's something about that, and I like to lean into that and find out, okay, so what is that? What gift am I being offered here, and what meaning can I make of that? So yeah, really excited about today.
Well, yeah, it's lovely to see you experience your excitement. And not last but not least, Sandra.
Hi, I'm in Manchester in private practice. I'm writing my CTA, and I'm thoroughly enjoying these series. I've not managed to make all of them, but I'm attending as many as I can. And I think I'm here actually to work out how I think about this, to form an opinion, inform my thinking, and that's an ongoing process. So yeah, but I'm really enjoying these series. So thank you very much, Paul, for sorting them.
You're welcome. So, Keith, shall we just run through the tenets just to make sure that everybody, you know, a minute each. So those of you who have been before will know that we normally do this because there are new people, everyone. So, do you want to start with weeness, or should I start with weeness, Keith?
I'm always. It's interesting how language changes, because it's you referred to these as tenets.
Mm-hmm.
I never have. I refer to them as principles.
Mm-hmm.
Tenets come. The word tenet comes from I think the Latin to mean to hold, and to me that's a little bit too tight. It's like, these are the tenets, you've got to hold these. Whereas I think principles are a bit like, oh, you know, these are principles, but you may have other ones. So I'm interested how that language has got sort of changed, and maybe it's something that's developed in your group, Paul. So yeah, and also I'll say something about a relational TA, because that's but anyway, the three principles of co-creative TA. So you want just to do a brief introduction so that we are sharing some common language?
Yeah, just so that everybody knows what, when we talk about co-creative TA, just what it's based on.
Okay, so I'm smiling because I'm just remembering where these came from. So almost at the end of when Graham and I wrote that original article, because I got a background, my first degree is in philosophy and theology, so I tend to think philosophically about things like, well, what's the principles, what's underneath, what's the epistemology and ontology and so on. So I said, look, I'm a bit fed up with people coming up with theory where they don't ground them in principles, you know. So we come up with these different ideas about ego states and transactions, ego states, scripts and games, but what are the principles that drive, that underlie these things? So I said, we've got to put this in the article. So we wrote them last, but we put them first, you know, like you do. And we came up with three, which actually I have to say have stood the test of time, because I'm a philosopher and because I'm quite a critical thinker, I keep going back and saying, well, are there other ones and so on? These seem to work. So the first three principles are the principles of weeness, principles of principle of shared responsibility, and the principle of present-centered development. The principle of weeness is basically saying it's not all about me, or I, you know, there is such thing as society, unlike, you know, what Margaret Thatcher said, because she said famously there was no such thing as society. There are more we cultures in the world than there are me cultures, etc., etc. So we're really sort of making a bid for saying there is something co-created from a weeness. And we were also taking a bit of a shot at old style training, which was which basically said that if you said we, that was automatically symbiotic. You said it's a bit hot in here, or can we have the window open? I remember actually saying this at Metanoia, because I trained at Metanoia. Can we have the window open? Speak for yourself. Say I. I'm going, oh, okay. Can I have the window open? Is that okay? You know, you can see that's like an adaptation, but you know, that was okay. That was better. So the idea that, you know, if I say anything that's to do with we is symbiotic, I think is problematic. You know, it needs further analysis. It may be symbiotic, but it may not be. And in societies where, you know, I live here and very influenced by Maori culture, where I talked to a colleague about, you know, how about doing a PhD? And he says, well, I'll think about that and I'll take that back to my iwi, my tribe, and we will decide whether that's a good thing for me to do. Very different. And there are actually more cultures like that in the world than there are individualistic cultures. So, principle of weeness, I would say. That's just my take on it tonight. Do you want to add anything to that, Paul?
No. I'll pick up on the shared responsibility. Yeah. So the shared responsibility, I think, comes picking up on what Keith said, this thing about symbiosis, because we we don't often share responsibility. We know either we're responsible for something or we're not. So in organisations, particularly, or in the schoolroom, yeah, the teacher or the boss is responsible, and everybody else is, it sort of follows. Yeah, so there's an adaptation. So actually sharing the responsibility for things is quite challenging, and it challenges the symbiosis, and it can be really more than challenging, really difficult to let go of your responsibility, or to take the responsibility, or invite taking the responsibility. And what we find, particularly with co-creative TA in terms of shared responsibility, is that it's not equal, and it goes from one to the other, depending on who's got the expertise, who's got the knowledge, who's got the toolkit, and what the circumstances demand. So it's like I like thinking about a healthy symbiosis rather than a pathological symbiosis, where the healthy symbiosis is where the responsibility, the adult part or the parent bit, changes from time to time between different people. So we share the responsibility, we share the adult thinking, we share the experiences, we take this social cultural thing into account sometimes, and other times we just want to play. Yeah, we want to be looked after. So we can, if we're in a weeness, in a co-creative field, it's okay for that responsibility to ebb and flow as circumstances arise.
Are we sharing responsibility for the third principle?
Yeah, I'll just throw in that we've been playing around with healthy symbiosis, and my other half, Debbie's got a really interesting model of a healthy symbiosis using integrating adults, where we each choose from our integrating adult what responsibility we'll take.
How do you draw that, Paul?
Oh, I'll see if I can find it and share it on the screen later. Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah, over to you, Keith.
And the third principle is the principle of present-centered development. And this was really a principle that encapsulates the idea that we were particularly interested in working in and with the present. And it was based on a critique of the view in TA that was around and still is around in some different schools, that in order to get better, you have to regress. You have to regress or be regressed and repair something in the past. So, you know, you have an inner child workshop to be able to play and feel better in your child because you didn't get to play with your dad or whatever. And that's a past-centered repair. Whereas, and for me, it was encapsulated in the slogan that was around at Metanora in the 80s, where particularly Sue Fish, who I loved dearly, but she had this slogan about it's never too late to have a happy childhood, which, if you think about it, is very much based on the idea of repairing something in the past. Sorry, I'm just going to turn off. Getting interruptions. And I thought, for me, that didn't work. I did do regressive reparenting workshops, but it sort of leaves you, I think, a bit dependent on the person who's given you the repair, and therefore doesn't really hold. So my slogan, which doesn't go on a mug because it's too long, you know, because it's never too late to have a happy childhood is a good slogan, you know, you can sell it. But my slogan is something like, it is too late to have the happy childhood that you didn't have, but it's not too late to grieve that loss and to co-create the conditions under which you live happily in the present for the future. And actually, I think that's nearer to Burns. I mean, it's not a very sexy slogan, but big mug. But it's nearer to Burns' idea about working in the present about the past to ensure the future. I paraphrase. So, and the more sort of edgy critique was some trainers who present themselves as a bit of the guru trainer who does this sort of the magic touch, or the guru therapist, the itinerant guru therapist who does these wonderful workshops where you feel, you sort of left feeling like, oh, that was wonderful, or he was wonderful, she was wonderful, but you don't feel so wonderful yourself. And yeah, to me, it's more about the power in the patient, the power in the relationship. So, and the other thing for me, and maybe this gets us into some of the stuff about transference, is I don't think you have to dig around in the past, because the past will come and bite you on the bum in the present. So that then it's like, oh, so I don't have to go, oh, what about this? What about that? Because somebody will do something. They'll express a critical parent or a big parent, or they'll trip themselves up, or they'll tell a joke that isn't funny, or there'll be some interruption, which to me is the past, the transference from the past coming into the present. That's it.
And that's where I may integrate Hagen and Sill's model.
Yeah.
When it happens in the present, I may think about it in terms of, okay, what transference has just happened. So I might not work in the transference in the same way that Hagen and Sills talk about so much anymore, but I will use their model to be thinking about what's just happened between us. What is it that they're needing from me? Not necessarily that I give it to them, but that we can talk about it.
So would it be fair to say that that's sort of informational? There's a sort of sense of that's a good model for understanding the information that you might be picking up.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily working with the archaic child to repair something. You're still working adult to adult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So
how does that all sound in terms of, because that bit was to sort of bring you all on the same page. I guess we should allow a little bit of a pause to see if you are on the same page, or whether you've got any queries about that before we focus on integrating adult.
That sounds good.
Is it making sense to you, Alan? You're sort of saying, oh, I'm new to all this, but that's a sort of the 5-minute guide to co-creative TA?
No, thank you very much indeed, Kate. That really, and Paul, that was really helpful. Yeah.
I mean, one thing I picked up more recently is the okayness aspect of that's implied, I think, within co-created TA. And in my article in the TAJ, I talked about, I think co-created TA is more than just okay position. It's more of a positive position, more of a healthy position. So, picking up on what Keith said about Roger's an unconditional positive regard. I think there's something when we're in we-ness and we're sharing the responsibility and we're present-centered, that we can look at, we can look at ourselves with positive regard, and we can unconditionally be in that field. Yeah. So I think Rogers talks about, and person-centered is about the worth, the worth of ourselves and the worth of others. And for me, or Keith and Graham didn't really pull out the okayness. I think it's embedded in there, it's implicit in what they wrote about.
I'm glad you added that, Paul, because for me that felt like there was just the underpinning respectful glue that allows a person to feel safe and seen, that you've just named it, and that everything comes together beautifully because of it. So thank you.
I just check something that I'm on the right page or on the same page, not the right page perhaps. When you talk about present-centered development, what I'm thinking about working in the present is, say something is activated from the past with a client. So that is somatically hot, it's activated. And and it's so the kind of way is working from a very adult, integrating adult to adult. It's a kind of subtlety of the therapist holding the adult rather than going into, say, something like reparenting.
Yeah.
So I'm just wanting to clarify that a little bit for me, please.
Yeah. Well, my clarification is to say yes, but I'm wondering if there's an example. I mean, I was thinking about your example about end of life.
Yeah, okay.
I'm thinking about regrets that people would have. So I wish I'd done that. So I mean, that's where I'm going, just thinking about your question.
Yeah,
thinking,
it is actually.
yeah,
I mean, I'll give you a basic clinical example off the top of my head. So, you know, I was thinking about, so sometimes working, say if people are incapacitated to a certain level because they're very unwell, and asking for help with things can take them right back. Say, just think really basic incontinence, yeah. And people don't ask. Some people don't ask because they can't bear the idea of asking. So there's a very subtle, when I was working and teaching with nurses and stuff, is to kind of keep a very adult-centered way of working. So, you know, kind of, there's a subtlety you can, or you feel, you know, you can hear the sing-song voice. I'm giving a very basic example, or you can hear a very respectful, how would you like it? What would you like? Kind of really cathartic. So in other words, caring at a basic level can be done in a kind of co-creational way, or it could be done in a very parental way. And I think it's much more empowering and in a present-centered way. And actually that means that someone says, okay, I'm not discussing, you know, I'm talking about, sometimes people are visiting very early experiences being incontinent. And, you know, oh, I'm disgusting. That's the kind of stuff they come up with. And actually being very, I mean, I've always asked, you know, get the client, get the nurses and people to ask the client about themselves and things like that. So I'm using that as a very example, which can actually, some people I've noticed, I'm just observing, I've noticed that people have changed about themselves. And there is a grief of the past, but there's something new in the present. So I'm wondering if that's co-creational basic example, really. I
think so. Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm always interested in working with and deepening the present. And I'm very influenced by Daniel Stern's work, both developmentally, but also his work on the present moment, which I just think is stunning. I'm rereading it for something I'm writing currently, and the detail at which, you know, those present moments occur, and and the pain and the grief. As I said, I think you nodded when I used the word grief. You know, like grieving the loss, grieving what I will never have, you know. I realize there's a lot of grief in emigrating, not only in leaving the UK. I mean, it was intentional and so on, but I remember my wife and I, Louise, went to a party quite early on when we were here of a 70-year-old that we knew, and we saw the longevity of those relationships. And we realized, as much as we love being here and so on, we realized nobody's going to stand and speak for us when we're 70, 80, you know, that we won't have that longevity here. And there was so in this celebration, there was a loss, there was this moment of, you know, and I think that's worth catching. It's like that, and resolve, you know, working through or resolving or doing whatever, you know, being the old guy who is incontinent and who thought about that, as I do now at the grand old age of 67, and think, oh, what, you know, what's going to happen with me, and oh, that would be awful, and then maybe I will be that guy, and remember that moment of and feeling, you know, excruciating and embarrassed and so on, but working through resolving, doing whatever we call cure, that's the present-centered development. That,
Yeah.
you know, that moment of I can manage that, or I can't manage it, or, you know, that to me is the present-centered development, rather than conceptualizing it as I've got to go back and resolve something that's unresolved in my child ego state.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you don't mind for it. It arises naturally. So it's kind of, it's in the forefront. It might have been there a long time, but certain circumstances arises, or the relational. So if you're talking in psychotherapy, sometimes it arises naturally, and working with that. And I think it is how the therapist or whoever holds themselves to invite that. I think that, I'm just talking out loud at the moment, but that's how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. And that, I think, gets us into the sort of, I'm going to go somewhere else, but I still want to check with you, Paul, because I thought one of the thoughts I had after that beautiful and very rich check-in, I also want to acknowledge that Jacqueline's joined us. Jacqueline, hi, hello, can you hear us?
Oh, she's gone.
She's gone. Okay, Jacqueline's gone. I had a thought for us to perhaps respond to things that struck us about people's introduction, and so I was going to make some links and a little bit of a riff.
Feel free, if that's okay with everybody.
So to make some connections, and perhaps you would do that as well, Paul, and then we can see where we go from there. I'm also thinking, just registering that as this is a relatively small group, that maybe we'll stay together, maybe we will see how we go, but you know, because I know some people like small groups and so on. But so I just, okay, so that was, you know, just staying in touch with you, Paul. So I was thinking that kind of gets me to pick up on something that you said, Monica, about body work, because for me, and I'll speak for myself, the idea of the integrating adult was very close, or very influenced by organismic psychology, which I get from person-centered psychology and back in terms of organismic psychology. And so I see that as very much a body, as a metaphor really for personhood and body. So what I find myself doing in therapy is often paying attention to things like breath and the body and pausing, and you know, like in conversation with you, Jane, I might fill up, you know, I might feel tearful in response to what somebody's saying, and just notice that and be. So it's very, to me, it's very sort of deconstructed, quite gentle, hopefully respectful work. It's going with the interruption, it's going with the pause, it's going with the rupture, the missing, those sort of things. And to me, that's all quite body oriented. So I wanted to come back to that, because I think it is, because that for me is, it's almost like seeing this ego state actually more as an organismic way of thinking about the personality, where, as distinguished from the introjected parent and the archaic child, as these rather fixed, stuck, traumatized, they're metaphors for the fixed, stuck, traumatized aspects of ourselves. So that's why I got to the sort of integrating adult, the moving circles, the sort of sense of we're in process, we're in movement, we change, we are neo-psychic. It's the new, constantly updating psychic aspect of ourselves, or aspect of our psyche. So that was one of the connections that I wanted to make in relation to what people had said.
And I think that's a really good example of being an integrating adult, in terms of we're in the moment. We've been listening to what's been going on in the moment, rather than being fixated on the plan that we have got. And I think we're accounting for what's coming up in the moment, and we're both, I'm sure, also aware of what we plan to do and what we think you're expecting to find out here, which is something about integrating adult. And yet, so I think we are really integrated. We've got we're taking in, I'll tell you what, if I share one of my screens, and I pick up on, where's it gone? Sorry, I can't find this. There we go. So I suppose what I'm suggesting is that what we've been doing, Keith and myself have been in contact with our external environment, i.e. you guys, as well as between Keith and myself. And we're aware from our past, from our archaeopsyche, what Keith and I, we know we're expecting to do, and we've got a view of what you will be expecting. But we're also conscious of listening to what you've been saying and picking up on things. And we have been wrestling in a way between what we were planning to do and what your expectation is and what we plan to do and what you are clearly excited about and you bring it into the room. So
you're kind of applying that, you're applying the integrating adult to education now. This educational process.
Yeah, or this contact for we're here for a particular purpose, which is not just education, it's about it being in relationship and being in contact. So I think that's a really nice example of how I think we've been working.
Nice.
That makes sense to you?
Interesting.
I've got a question actually. Is there any time when integrating adult wouldn't be a good option for someone? I'm thinking about war maybe right now.
You're thinking about war?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was thinking about war as well, from the point of view, because I've done 2 sessions with Ukrainian transactional analysts, doing one on co-creative TA and the other on radical psychiatry, which are both my sort of 2 languages within TA, 2 interests. And somebody's brought up the question about hate, whether hate was integrating adult, and I said absolutely. So, because if we did, well, again, depends. So the more sophisticated answer is it depends. It depends on an ego state analysis, because if you go with what Bern said in terms of the adult is the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors appropriate, adapted to the here and now, then feeling angry about your country being invaded and even feeling hateful, I hate this, you could argue is integrating adult. Where I got to was saying, and I'm interested in staying in relationship. So rather than simply hating somebody and then saying, well, so we'll blow them up or we'll resist, whatever, I'm interested to say I hate you, and which in a way says let's have a conversation. I really don't like the fact you invaded my country, and I will fight you. Get out and let's talk. So I think that's a little bit of a riff on the war, but I think no. I think it's always good to have, because that's the healthy, generative, neo-psychic aspect of ourselves, while we have all these other things that we're dealing with, these stuck, archaic, interjected.
Could it be that hate, because hate is usually, in my way I think about hate, is that it's anger that where someone feels powerless. So if it becomes not necessarily from adult, it's just hate and it becomes more out there, Whereas what
Yeah.
you were talking about was more experiencing that feeling, but also this is because there's a sort of rapport that at least is going towards trying to do something about it. Like, I don't like what you're doing. So there's a relation, there's a we-ness in it, rather than an objectivity, you know, all people from X place are bad.
Yeah.
There's all people from X place is bad seems very much like a kind of child ego state. But I hate the fact that my country's been invaded and these are still men who've got families and are just like me.
Yeah.
So hate, there's a difference in the hate.
Yeah, there is. And
quality of it.
What I was facing with the workshop was that they've excluded Russian colleagues, and which they hadn't done the week before the invasion. They'd had a conference where they'd welcomed Russian colleagues, and then after the bombings and particularly of the hospital and so on, maternity hospital, they said, no, we're not having Russian colleagues. So to me, I could get to a place of saying, I hate you. We hate you so much at the moment that we has to be us Ukrainians holding together and doing what we need to do. And we might hopefully we'll get to a point where we can talk to you again. But, you know, like, I think there's a sort of sense in which sometimes you just need your own space. I mean, I learned that, you know, 30, 40 years ago in relation to feminism and the women's movement, saying, you know, sometimes we need women-only spaces. Thank you very much. Or gay spaces, or, you know, whatever. So I think there's a way in which, you know, that the integrating adult can cope with, you know, hate and autonomy and sometimes excluding for a purpose. But the broader, the bigger vision is, yeah, let's sort this out. You know, if you think that some part of our country needs to be in your country, let's talk about that. Don't bomb the shit out of us, you know.
Keith,
thank you for saying that, Keith, because you know, it's really difficult. You know, this is really difficult, and if we don't do that, what you said, that sometimes I hate you so much I can't be with you in the same room. If we don't do that, then we go into what Widdowson calls okayness racket.
Yeah.
And then it's all a little bit plastic, fantastic, and it's a bit fake.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great, thank you.
I'm also thinking about.
Can I just bring? Dennis did want to come in,
sorry, Dennis.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to thank you because you've really struck a chord for me there, Keith, when you're talking about hate. I see it as it's either a cul-de-sac where it's going nowhere and that's not healthy, or as you typified it there, saying I hate you but and want to carry on. But I was thinking the other week about how can people in a country that's been invaded still have talks with the invaders. That's exactly an example, I think, of what you just, I hate you, but it's not a cul-de-sac. I want to move and do something about it. And that seems to be so much healthier than having an emotion that's sometimes typified as being negative and just dwelling in it and not doing anything with it.
Okay. Rachel.
I'm also thinking in answer to Monica's question about our defences in times of severe crisis like war, and defences that we would in the integrating adult model put in parent or child, but actually how they could be useful. You know, our drivers, our injunctions in terms of being strong or don't feel, or that actually, you know, when our lives are in threat, or, you know, physically or psychologically, those defences that come from childhood and potentially pathological can help us survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that as you were talking there, it makes me go back to the original relationship. You know, the breast and feeding, you know, and you hurt me so much that, you know, I want to get rid of you, but I still need to be in relationship with you. That's kind of where I'm going with it, right back to this is the same thing that we've been dealing with over and over again.
Yeah.
It's not really changing, but I do believe that we are changing the way we see it and the lens that we look through it with the integrating adult and the co-creative information.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think the integrating adult bit is what we choose to do with the feeling. Yeah, it's about, it's not relying on an archaic pattern. Yeah, this is how I kept myself safe in the first, and this is originally when I was little. This is how I defended myself and kept enabled my survival. It's I'm feeling hatred against being invaded, and I'm acknowledging that. And what am I going to do?
Yeah, or what am I going to do differently now?
Yeah,
taking this information, and because I want to be in relationship with you, but I'm not feeling very nice at the moment. I'm not feeling very held or heard or seen. So let me take a beat, let me take some time out, and then I'll come back into it. I think that's what, Keith, you were referring to about let me have my awareness here, and then when I'm ready and I can be in a place where I can hear you and I can communicate, then let's talk, and let's keep talking. And that may mean I come in and I come out, and I come in and I come out, but I do it with respect, and I do it with open communication, going back to Bern.
One of the things that Keith has got in the middle of his integrating adult is about being in contact with our archaeopsyche and the exterior psyche, and acknowledging and not being defensive about what's in there, but being able to choose, because it's very unusual for us to develop an answer or a solution for something that we haven't experienced. So to me, it's about making that choice from our toolkit, from our experiences, from experiences of others. That's, it's a really good opportunity to rake around and see what's a really good option. And then, of course, to also think, is there something that I've not experienced? So looking at creative problem solving is going outside your experiences. Yeah. So, and in the integrated adult model, I think that's the arrows to the outside, which may be a book or a video or getting advice. So we're not just stuck with our past experiences and our past experience of others. We've got resources, so we can go into the winner's triangle.
So actually, it's an opportunity for growth. When you touch me or when I feel something, it's about, okay, this is an opportunity for growth. I may not be able to do it in this with you right now, but I might need to go read or go and do some reflection or meditation, but then I can come back in and keep that conversation going. Yeah.
But I'd be interested in sharing a diagram that I did for the Ukrainian people, which is about from the integrating adult. Would that be okay to share, to pull? I think, and particularly to respond to your point, Rachel, about defenses are there for protection, and even thinking about, is there a useful concept of an integrating adult defense? Is this an appropriate adaptation to here and now reality? I'll just see if I can share this screen, because I think it's relevant. So this is called, can you see that? Physis in the Face of Trauma?
Yep.
So if I get that as a main slideshow from current slide.
Is it okay to take a picture of that, Keith?
Yeah. Now, is it still there in the shared screen thing? I'm trying to get it.
Yeah, so we've got a Physis in the Face of Trauma up on the screen, Keith.
But you haven't got the animations.
Yeah, we've got an integrated adult model.
Yeah, have you got present trauma coming in, or is it just fixed?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So the integrating adult and this was a conversation about Physis in the Face of Trauma. So there's the Physis model, which is without going too much into that, is coming out from and into the integrating adult. Yeah, just bear that in mind. And then what I was thinking is, we've got this trauma, the present trauma that is real. It's not it's not imagined. people aren't making this up. This is really happening, you know, bombs and invasions and rape and all the horrible stuff that war brings enacted in war. And so it's having an impact on both the present in terms of integrating adult, but it's also evoking intergenerational trauma. This has happened before, and this is what my grandma told me about the, you know, Russian invaders, Nazi invaders, whatever. And it's also evoking past unresolved trauma. And what I was suggesting that you could think about that in two ways. One is that it's re-evoked, it's past unresolved trauma that's been lying dormant, but it's re-evoked by the current trauma, the current, you know, abuse or whatever, and or re-disintegrated. And I introduced this idea of maybe we've had something that's been relatively integrated, but in the face of such trauma like war, it actually gets disintegrated. So we sort of start, you know, disintegrating, you know, falling apart. And so this is a very, you know, just a week ago thinking new model or new aspect. And so what do? You know, we can think about it in these ways. Now, what you just said, Rachel, got me thinking about, well, I sort of almost want to put some protection around the integrating adult. So I'm thinking that maybe adult defenses, so we know what parent defenses and child defenses look like or feel like, but maybe there are adult defenses which we need to construct around the integrating adult in the face of such severe trauma as, you know, abuse and war. And that's actually, those are adult defenses. They're realistic, you know, appropriate adaptations to the here and now reality. So like you can't see, but I'm sort of wanting to almost draw a sort of like a little defensive, you know, something around the integrating adults that says the integrating adult is limited for the time being. It's this thing about, I hate you and I can't be with you at the moment, so I'm going to be a bit limited here, but I'm doing the best. And of course, and this is what the Ukrainians were saying, is that, you know, there's something that's happened in our responses. You know, we are talking with each other, we are keeping cafes open, we are, you know, I mean, there's incredible amount of, you know, community spirit and resilience and so on, which for some people is actually a demonstration of their integrating adult. So that seemed useful. It seemed to make sense to them, which was the main thing. But I'll just offer that partly to in response to what we're talking about.
So I'm wondering, Keith, if this is what a child does when it experiences trauma. It gets re-evoked or re-disintegrated. Yeah. And the focus is survival. How do I survive in this situation?
Yeah. So you freeze or you fly or you yeah, absolutely.
And then that gets gets put as a solution and becomes a pattern.
Yeah.
Surely it's about our awareness, whether that defense comes from integrating adult or parent or child. So we might have the same reaction in terms of fight. You know, fight may be an appropriate response, mightn't it?
Yeah.
Flee certainly maybe as well.
Yes.
But where it's coming from, whether it's coming from a conscious awareness of we're defending, even if it's similar to our past defenses, but if it's in consciousness, then it may be an integrating adult defense. If it's out of consciousness, then perhaps it's coming from parent or child.
Yeah.
But
yes,
both,
it's not available to awareness. Yeah.
Both may have useful outcomes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, go on, you go, Paul.
It's like when you're driving along a motorway at 70 miles an hour and a stoplight comes on in the car in front of you. You don't think, should I? Let me just think. Should I hit the brake or should I manoeuvre? Or, you know, I mean, it's done, isn't it? Because it's it's a pattern that you don't need to think about because you've got to stop hitting that car in front.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it, a non-integrated adult response can be really helpful sometimes.
But I wonder if it's an integrated response when it could be turned on and off and appropriate to the situation. So, for instance, if someone's continually in shock because they've had an accident and I'm using your metaphor for, continually putting their foot on the brake. I know when I've had an accident, driving the next few weeks is pretty shaky. So I think it's a bit kind of like. And where am I going? I'm thinking about the war and thinking about when soldiers come back, but still some soldiers get on with life. And that was the event when I worked with people who are soldiers who come back and they get on with their lives and their family, and others come back to their families and are still kind of at war in a way. Because I wouldn't want to be open emotionally if I was having to fight, but if you come back and you're still like that, that means that it's a different kind of defense, I imagine.
Yeah.
I'm sort of aware that Keith put non-conscious within the integrating adults.
Yes, I was going to come on to, I'm glad you picked that up because I was going to come on to that. Let me stop sharing because I'd like to come back to you as a group.
Yeah. And I've been curious about, and a lot of people say, why is Keith put non-conscious in there? If it's non-conscious, it's defended. Well, it doesn't need to be defended. So it can be a healthy pattern. It can be a non-conscious, non-defensive pattern that has been integrated because we've processed it.
Or never disintegrated or unintegrated. Because a lot of the integration, I mean, we're amazing. We go back to the image of the organism. We are hugely complex organisms, and it's the miracle is that we actually hang together. All the moving parts that we have, and what can go wrong. And Rogers and the organismic, theorists talk a lot about this. People like Alfred North Whitehead and so on. And so we adopted the non-conscious, specifically from Daniel Stern, who distinguishes between, if you like, the unproblematic unconscious, which he talks about as the non-conscious, as distinct from the unconscious, as in more psychoanalytic thinking. So we like that idea. So I would say that you put your foot on the brake, probably non-consciously. I mean, it's sort of it's that cycle of competence, unconscious competence. You've done it so many times before. It's sort of natural reaction. So we do a lot of things, and we get peristaltic movement. We chew and swallow, and then the stuff that goes between there and our stomachs is peristaltic movement, which is an example of non-conscious processing. So there's lots of that going on all the time, and that's a massive part of our lives. So I would say there's a huge amount of stuff that is or aspects of our personality and lives that is non-conscious and integrated. Then there's the stuff that's problematic and gets stuck and fixated and so on, which we tend to think about in terms of introjected parent ego states or archaic child ego states, that we then work with consciously, unconsciously, through all sorts of things. And integrate and resolve. But I'm also holding the fact that we can re-disintegrate under pressure. Oh, so just in terms of, and I'm sorry, Noelle, I meant to say this before Noelle went, but she mentioned about training in, relational TA and the relational model. I've always held that co-creative TA is a relational TA, and it's a little bit of a bugbear of mine that it's got a bit split from, there's relational TA a la Hargaden and Stills, and then there's co-creative TA, Summers and Tudor. Helena and Charlotte, who I know very well and have known for many years, talk about their model. They talk about, in the original book is relational transactional analysis, a relational approach or a relational perspective, not the relational perspective. So it's become a bit reified over the years, and I think certainly Charlotte has always acknowledged co-creative TA as equally but differently relational. And in our book, we make some distinctions between us and Richard Erskine's integrative TA, and us and Helena Hagland and Charlotte Till's relational TA. But I would say it's equally relational, because we're just working with different focus. So we have a slightly different model of empathic transactions and so on and so on. So if you're interested in that, you can sort of delve down into it. But I just want to hashtag just saying, it's a relational TA. So I tend to distinguish between relational TA, relational brackets psychodynamic, or relational co-creative. Relational psychodynamic brackets Hagland, Sills, Foley, other people, and so on. And that kind of brings me to, Rachel, your point about the different ego state models. And it's interesting, because I've had Charlotte first raised this about saying, well, look, I really like your integrating adult, but I really like our model of self, so it's like, I want to combine it in some way. And I think what she did was to put the child in the adult and just sort of basically say, well, that's my developmental model. So at some level, I actually don't mind. I think I don't see it, and maybe it's my being a bit. I sometimes think I'm a bit simple, a bit sort of straightforward bloke, and I just think, well, that's, I don't see it. But I think if you do see it, or if you want to work, it's like, that's okay. So I really don't, in that sense, I do genuinely mean I don't mind, because I think if people can put things together, like I can maybe come along and see some other people's theories and put things together, but I can't see it for myself. I just don't, it doesn't make much sense to me. But if it makes sense to you, I think that's cool, because I'm a constructivist, and going back to that comment about social constructivism, and saying that these are metaphors. These are, in a sense, we're arguing about metaphors. I find the metaphor of the integrating adult, sufficient. I don't get too exercised by second order and certainly third order structural analysis of the child ego state. But if people get turned on by P1 minus, that's all good for, get to pie, all good, as we say here. It just doesn't turn me on. But I suppose what I'm more interested in than that is the consistency. So I think if you're saying, if you're saying that the child ego state is basically a metaphor for archaic, unresolved, traumatic parts of your personality, it doesn't make much sense to say that's what develops first, or that's the source of physis, or that's the source of the little professor intuition. And so I do think the one ego state model of health has some implications, which you then have to chase through to make it philosophically and theoretically consistent. So that's my pitch. But I did want to respond to what you were saying, Rachel, and maybe what was in other people's minds as well, in relation to relational TA, brackets psychodynamic. So I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that, or has any comment on that, but I suppose I wanted to finish that, sort of picking up on your check-in.
So have you covered off the bits that you were?
That's my case.
So we've got best part of an hour left. Yeah. So is there any specifics that you've still got in your head that you want to sort out, you want to get some take on, or should we just do an explore of integrating adults? I'll take the just out. Shall we do an explore of? Yeah.
We're going to get challenged by Alan then.
It's a be strong thing.
Yeah.
So if I stick up the the integrated adults, and Keith and I have had some interesting conversations over dinners, and I remember one in, where was it? Was it Switzerland? Berlin? No, it was before that. I think it was you were examining, and I was there with Debbie because she had been examining, and we were writing on the tablecloths. We were drawing
yes,
tables on the tablecloths. And exploring what we were seeing in these. So we don't, a bit like Graham and Keith, me and Graham don't always agree. So I mean, this is Keith's model. So Keith said, just as we were talking through it in the break, they've invited me to say why I like it and what I got from it, and why it's so good from my perspective. And there were a couple of things that I always had in my head when I was being taught TA, that I had real difficulties with. And it was the traditional Burnian model of ego states that gave me a problem, and this solved it for me. So if we look at, I mean, neo-psyche integrated adult is more or less what I was thinking of when I read the Burns view of it, except that it seemed to me to be very static, an integrated adult, Burns adult. And this was great because it's got all these wonderful circles around it, the dynamic nature of it. So it's pulsating, it's energetic, which I always thought was great. And then when we look at what Keith explained in going back to Federn's model, which Byrne did as well, with an exterior psyche and an archaeopsyche, and Byrne changed those to parent and child, because I think because he was trying to make it accessible and simpler, and I think he lost something in the translation. So one of the problems I had with the model of a parent ego state, and Keith fantastically put in there that the exterior psyche includes parent ego states. And I remember at that conversation on that table at dinner, I said to Keith, so it says it includes parent ego states. So if it includes, it means by definition, it's got things in that are not parent ego states. So what else is in there? And Keith said, "Oh, I've never really thought about that." but it does. You know, it's like that. Including means there's other things, yeah. And the problem I had with Byrne's definition of a parent ego state, it's about big people, powerful people. And I remember when I was 5. Having a really good mate, Brian. So he's in my exterior psyche, but he's not in my parent ego state, because he wasn't a big person. He was only the same age as me, and yet he still exists.
Why is he not in your integrating adult?
Well, So the integrating adult, the neo-psyche, is present-centered, so he's not here and now, is he? So he's in my past. So there will be parts of Brian, my experiences of my interactions with Brian at 5 years old or 4 years old or 6. And my experiences of those interactions will be in my archaeopsyche because it's my past.
But my past is 1 second ago. My past is
absolutely, yeah.
So everything you're saying, that everything from the past goes into the exterior psyche, but that's
yeah. And it will be accessible.
See, this is where I think you and I disagree, because I think I didn't pay enough attention to the including. I think you picked up on this including, and I don't think I've used that since. I think I would say the exterior psyche is, and in fact in the original I put including introjected parent ego states, not just including parent ego states. So it's very specific to me. The extero psyche and Burn's model is the introjected parent ego state. So I would say, I think rather like Rachel, perhaps you're pointing to, is that your experiences about your unparentified experiences of Brian actually go into the neo psyche, and it's only the problematic past that is the extra psyche. So we may have different views about that.
Yeah, and I suppose following that argument, Keith, if there was a problematic part of Brian,
if there was a problematic part of Brian that you had swallowed whole and not integrated, I would see that as exteropsyche, and possibly some aspect of your own experience of that problematic side, that he was a dominant or you were passive, whatever, would be archaeopsyche. That would be the unintegrated, archaic experience.
Yeah. And I suppose I'd come back to the Burns definition of an introject, and parent introject is a parental one, which is a powerful one and a big person. So
I think it's a really good point, Paul, because I work with children, you know, and I obviously know the influence of siblings, both in a positive, in the neo-psychic as a support, and but also in the extra psychic and the, sorry, I'm going to get my head around the word, and so I think it's a really good point that actually our ego states start to develop from birth. Well, even probably before in the womb, in some way there's a felt sense of the other's body, and so yeah, I like what you're saying.
I think if you take it to extreme, we'll have introjects of less powerful people.
But I think you're talking about a 3 ego state model, though, Paul. I agree with you that we interject positive, positive people and experiences, but that to me feels like there's positive and pathological in our parent ego state, which is a 3 ego state model.
Okay, and I suppose my issue is this word parent, because when we think of a parent, we think of a powerful older person, big person, not a 4-year-old. So it just enabled me to put things, enable me to process and imagine different people that I had encountered, that I'd sucked in, that were not parental figures. And similarly with the archaeopsyche and the child ego state, because it's called the child ego state, we default to thinking of our past when we were children. And as like Rachel said, what happened to us a minute ago is now in our archaeopsyche.
Or neopsyche.
Or neopsyche, if it's non-dependent and it's integrated.
I think this is a really good conversation, because I think this is highlighting a difference of interpretation about this model. And I do think, you hold that, and I think the metaphors of parent and child are very powerful to you, and you take them literally. Like, parent is more of a parent figure and a child is more like a child figure or child experience, whereas I see it much more structurally and maybe a little bit concretely about it. It's like the extra psyche is the unintegrated, introjected parent ego state. I almost want to drop, in the context of this conversation, to drop reference to the parent to be sort of really clear. It's anything that is introjected and unintegrated. The archaeopsyche is anything that is archaic, fixated, traumatized, and unintegrated. So these are metaphors for these different parts of our personality, and the difference between this model, in my thinking, and the original, one of the Burnians Burns model of the 3 ego state model of personality and the 3 ego state model of health is exactly that, was what Rachel said, is that, you know, you've got that positive Brian in your Burnian parent ego state, but I would say you've got your positive experience, memories of Brian in the integrating adult, in the 1 ego state model.
Yeah.
I think that's really, that to me, that's a really clear distinction between the 2 models.
Yeah.
My supervisor really summarized the exteropsyche quite nicely. She said, this is what I was given, and the archaeopsyche is, this is what I'm left with. And there, I thought it was quite interesting way of putting it. But I also thought about the exteropsyche as a sociologist, I suppose. I always think about the context. So I also think about institutions, also architecture, and the way the urban planning affects our behavior, and nature, and all of this stuff. I don't know where would you put it, but I think that's some of it is probably neopsyche, some exteropsyche. I don't know.
Well, I always think it depends, and I mean, I can be quite assertive and say, oh, I think it's, but again, the answer I referred to you probably an hour ago is it depends on an ego state analysis of your relationship with that. So one person's building might be, feel very, they integrate, it's not problematic and so on. Another person may see it as an institution of colonization and see it as an oppressive extra psychic phenomenon. So I think it depends on your ego state analysis, and that's why I think it's useful to have these conversations to get clear about what is your ego state model and what's your analysis. And I think, and I've said this to you, Paul, before, I think what you flush out is this. I think you've actually got a different slightly mixed model, which works for you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't quite. Yeah, I don't quite get it in terms of that. And I would say I probably made a mistake in using the word including. I'm sorry I set you off on a train. And it was obviously very useful for you, but I sort of think, oh God, I wish I hadn't put including. Actually, another bit of story, is I didn't originally, in that 2003 chapter in the book that Helena and Charlotte and Helena edited, I didn't have anything in the integrating adult, and the publishers, Charlotte and Helena, sort of conveyed some conversation to me about they wanted some detail. They thought it was a good idea to put some details, some words into the integrating adult. So I did, and in some way, these words, which I know you like, and I stand by them to some extent, but the problem is that by putting those words in and not others, people have said, oh, it's that, that's the definition of the integrating adult and something else isn't. So, and it's that, and Graham took me to task about putting consciousness in, because he said, how can a 5-month-old baby be conscious about something? And I went, oh damn, I wish I'd resisted that call to put things in. So beware of what you write, because it can get quoted back at you. Even somebody's like more agreeing with, I'm going, oh, I wish I hadn't put that in. And Paul's saying, I'm glad you put that in.
So that was a nice introduction to what's in the neopsyche, Keith. Or not, or what might also be in it.
What might also be, other things.
So this is an amalgamation of what Keith's put in various versions of neopsyche, and I really enjoy some of the things that he did decide to put in, and I think it brings the curiosity out in me in terms of things in the neopsyche, integrating adults, that maybe traditionally we would have thought of as being in a parent or a child ego state. So spontaneous, if we think of the behavior model, functional model of ego states, we would expect spontaneous to be in a child ego state. Yeah. Intuition is often thought about in The Little Professor, which is in child ego state. Non-conscious, we've had a quick discussion about that. So that there are things that seem, well, they bring the curiosity out. Yeah. Why would you be intuitive in adults, and what's different to being intuitive from your Little Professor? You know, is there a difference? Is it the same thing? Do we access? Do we integrate and become in contact with our Little Professor from our adults in order to be intuitive or imaginative? I think it's just really nice because it makes these links between maybe the resolved things and what we can access through our integrating adults that's not defended. And we can also then access the defended stuff. If we rake back and explore what's in our past, what are the fixated bits, what are the defended bits, what are the interjects that were helpful that aren't helpful anymore. So I love it because it provides this connection to my past and my experiences of myself and others. And to me, it's just a way of supporting people sometimes with supervision and things to enable them to access what's in their past in a non-defensive way, in a safe way. So, any thoughts? Stop sharing the screen. You should all have this on. We sent them out anyway, so you should be able to access on your screen.
I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and I've got a very, I think, unreconstructed approach. I see it's three circles again. One is sum total of anything and everything that impinges or impacts upon us in the past and in the future and now, and I say in the future as well. One is our emotional reaction or instinctive reaction to those impacts, whether it's processed or unprocessed. And the middle one is where we take our reaction and we modify it according to some of those top circle impacts. I don't know if that makes any sense.
What was the summary of the first one?
The first one is anything that impacts on us in the past or present or in the future as an authority figure or an experience or anything that we see as being impactful, we take notice of. And we use that to moderate our emotional responses, and that's what is our integrated piece. I like it because it explains how we move from being overwhelmed by emotions and experiences into a position where we can actually handle them.
So it sounds like you're in a three ego state model of health.
I'm still in the three bubbles, yes.
Yeah, okay. And also interesting that you're also describing a sort of you're describing something around integration, like things coming in from the parent being processed through the child, and then
I'm saying
the taking and modifying is the adult function.
Yeah, exactly, because that would explain as the things coming in, including things in the future. So fear for the future or anxiety is the reaction from the bottom part, and the resolution of that state is what resides in the integrated adult. So if you're dealing with a client who's overwhelmed with anxiety about the future, that's an impact in the top. That's the future.
Yeah.
The bottom and the integration is what you're working with the client to get to some state where they can live with it.
Yeah. So would you tend to go in terms of, say, a broad treatment planning sequence, you'd go work with the parent first, work with the child second, and then develop the adult third. Sort of that there's a sort of logical progression in what you're saying.
I wouldn't be so prescriptive. I very much
Right.
believe in present, but in
Yeah.
working present, the things you said it before, the past comes back to bite you very often.
Yeah.
So whatever comes forward, I think of, right, so this is some impactful thing that the
Right.
client had. This is their response to it. That's not a problem for them. That's healthy. That's integrated. That is a problem for them. I need to help them integrate it better.
Hmm. Hmm.
Other comments, observations, curiosities? Do you want to argue with us or disagree?
Argue with that. Argue with Dennis.
I like this because we've got all different thoughts that are in flow, and that to me is the integrating.
Mhm.
It's not ed, which is past. And I think with language, we're maybe getting confused. It really clicked with me when, for me, I understood that it's not a thing, it's not a fact, it's always in a process. We're in flow. And if we're not in flow, then we need to take a piece of information from wherever it is and bring it into the here and now, work with it. So that's my understanding. It's a thing, it's a process, it's physis. We're all always in a process of becoming, taken from ledgers originally. And that's the organismic, that's the organism.
I loved the integrating adult diagram when I first saw it last autumn, because before that I just started the foundational year, so it's a traditional PAC model, and as soon as I saw the diagram, like my own ego state, sort of, I could understand that. And Keith, one of the things I liked was they included in both the top and the bottom. But I get what you're saying. But for me, you know, because what I was doing for exterior sites, and that maybe that's a bit like Monica saying, that I was choosing like institutions, or for me it was things like I was in the Air Force, or it was following Christianity, or it's following Islam. So it's actually choosing things to give me a set of rules, but it wasn't really integrating that. And it was only once I started to realize that I had to be like an integrating adult, and actually choosing the good and leaving the bad of those institutions, and integrating that into who I am just now. And just like Laura said, it's that whole process of physis. And I love the diagram you showed earlier on as well, Keith, about the trauma. You know, so it's like there is the trauma there from the child, and also there was trauma in the particular exterior psyche influences that I chose. There was trauma built into them already, intergenerationally and otherwise. So I was actually choosing things which actually had trauma coming with it. You know, so I suppose in the integrating adult, you're making choices, you know, about what is good and what's healthy for you, and getting in touch with that. So for me, it was, when I saw that diagram, it was like a light bulb moment that I actually started to understand myself. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Great, that's lovely. It's lovely to hear that, because it's very humbling, you know, because I sort of, you know, you write stuff and you don't quite know how it's going to go down, or how, and some people like it, some people don't, and some people really like it, and it sort of changes. So that's lovely feedback. As you were talking, Alan, I was thinking about what Piaget said about the difference between assimilation and accommodation. He used the lovely metaphor of the olive. So when you chew an olive, if you swallow it whole, you accommodate it. It's like you give it a home, but you haven't really chewed it. And what you do with olives, with, you know, pitted with olives with stones in, is you chew the flesh and you spit out the stone, and that is assimilation. You assimilate. So it's a very close to ideas about integration. And so what you've described, I think, beautifully, is that you take on something like an institution, and you maybe initially swallowed it whole, but then you've sort of gone back and gone, actually, I like that bit and I don't like that bit. And that's, I think, what we're doing with TA, you know, like there are aspects of TA that I think people don't talk about very much, that some of the sort of sexist, homophobic, you know, stuff that Byrne had in his books doesn't get taught, or if it does, it probably gets taught from a critical lens. That we wouldn't necessarily, well, hopefully we wouldn't swallow that whole. If you, as I do, you know, work more with the adult, I tend not to do, you know, to give permissions in the traditional way of, you know, the parent of the therapist speaking to the child of the client. So I think that this is all an example of where we are integrating, but, you know, we are chewing over different aspects of TA theory and developing them and adopting them and debating them and disagreeing. And
that's a lovely. The thing about the olive, that's, yeah, I'm going to keep that. That's a
you
brilliant
keep that
picture.
one. That's good. Great.
Yeah, no, that's almost better than a diagram, because it's something you can get in your own taste. Yeah, that's lovely.
And it's great.
Apply it to Scottish independence.
I wanted to say that it's great comment, Keith, about the TA as a sort of the framework, that it would be a terrible shame if TA theory became the parent, so instead of teaching TA trainees to be an adult and pick and choose, it kind of institutionally we are given this parent the TA canon in a way, and I think it's changing now. But it's very interesting sort of to poke at this a little bit. I've recently changed the therapist from TA to Gestalt. And oh my gosh, I mean, we have integrating adults constantly in the room, and it's absolutely fascinating how my Gestaltian therapist is doing it, but without the theory. It's just, it's very, very refreshing, very refreshing. So, yeah.
Can I ask a question? I cannot remember where I've seen the model, but it's the full circle. That's an A2 with the child and the parent inside the full circle. Whose model is that?
That's Charlotte's somewhere. I don't know where she published it. I probably could find it somewhere, but that was an early, her early sort of tussle and sort of saying she liked the integrating adult, but she wanted to put their theory of the development of the self in the integrating adult. I think it slightly overlaps.
I've seen it drawn as completely separate, but included in the A2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And
it's definitely
in their book, that when the chapter on parent ego state, they actually draw the parent ego state in the adult.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
As well. I found it interesting that they were kind of thinking about it. I'll have a look. I've got it here.
I'm just looking for it. Where is it? Oh, it's here.
It was Tony White model, wasn't it? Tony White had a model of parent inside the adult or something.
Yeah, I don't think he goes for the integrating adult, but he has his own model.
That's Charlotte and Helena's in the adult ego state on page 169.
Ah, okay. And with the global container.
Yeah. Existential realities.
P2 is in the A2, yeah. Yeah, but I don't agree with the P2 being outside. I mean, what's that about? Existential realities, P something?
It doesn't quite make sense, but I'm thinking we were playing with
playing with theory. I mean, I'm all for playing with theory, but I'm also for saying no, that's nonsense. that's my playfulness with theory. It's like, no, that doesn't work. Start again. At least it's not, I mean, it doesn't, well, I suppose, yeah, it's interesting with theory. because I think when you develop theory, my view is that you have some responsibility to, maybe it's my interest in the ancestors, or like the fuck up of the genealogy, to say, well, I'm changing this because of that and so on, not just putting something somewhere else. So to me, that doesn't do justice to the integrating adult. It just puts A2 somewhere else. But actually, to be fair to them, they probably weren't talking about the integrating adult. I think they were just talking about A2. Yeah. So I should let them off the hook. But I think, that's why I'm quite keen on going back to Byrne and then sort of tracing that sort of genealogy and then saying, well, why do you disagree with that? And then if you say things like, well, the intuition is in the adult, then you have to square off what happens to the little professor, or do you just junk that idea? So you sort of square that off.
I'm wondering about, it's worth just exploring that concept of expanding the adult, Keith.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Rather than deconfusing and things like that.
Yes, thank you for reminding me, because that gets us into Jane, what you presented at the beginning about the deconfusing the child at the end of life. Is this okay in terms of, do say if there's other things that because I was kind of beginning to be aware of time in terms of last half hour, so if there's other things that you want to talk about. So, and thank you, Paul, for sort of keeping up the squaring up, like saying, oh, let's talk about this and this. I'm enjoying that you're doing that. So the idea of expanding the adult, so we have this expanding adult, and if we're working with the adult, the idea is to help the client, in case of psychotherapy, but also education students and so on, to expand their adult. And of course, as the adult expands, it kind of overlaps diagrammatically, the child and the parent. So that's if you like, the way, rather than seeing, oh, you've got to decontaminate the adult, the emphasis is on expanding the adult and therefore minimizing or lessening the impact of the child and the parent. So there's less of a focus on doing anything very fancy, but rather than the client does the work. And in one of my diagrams, I think it's in the empathy article, the co-creative empathy article, I'm doing the sort of adult to adult, and then it's the client who's resolving, if you like, dipping down into the child, or like Alan saying, looking at some of the parent influences and how you accommodated or assimilated those. And so that's a way of decommissioning, cathecting the parent and child. So and this is slightly I'm smiling because this is slightly mysterious, but it's true, in terms of the logic, is that, so our view of decontamination is basically the whole of the child and the parent, so that's the contamination, and the decontamination is the integrating adult. So the idea, and this speaks to your point specifically, Jane, is so as somebody at the end of life is working through their stuff about incontinence and regret and so on, and so it's they're expanding their adult and basically getting rid of the child. So the point in the one ego state model of health is to have no interjected parent ego states or archaic unresolved or archaic child ego states, and simply an integrating adult. I mean, that's obviously an idealized view, and we'll probably never get there, but that's the logic. So I wouldn't be so much talking about deconfusing the child as integrating as much of that archaic material into the integrating adult as a way of ending life.
You're muted, Jane.
I'm just feeling a bit mixed here. I don't know if it's just I'm kind of thinking about 100 things at the moment, but when you're talking about the decontamination, I think the deconfusion is that, for me, is the more bodily sense. Say, for instance, So I'm trying to play with an example what's going in my mind. So say, for instance, someone's early childhood was that the mother was repulsed by the smelly nappy, okay?
Yeah.
And they kind of make some idea that they're disgusting or not, unless they're absolutely clean, okay?
Yeah.
The common feature, actually.
Yeah.
And so by being in a adult with an adult or with a say a nurse or staff with an adult relationship with that person, they clean them up, but in a very adult way. There's a different way of doing it. In that bodily sense of feeling disgusting, the smells, it's very somatic. And I think that there's something like, aha, maybe this is another, so it's kind of an integrated experience, but it's a very, some of this might be very unconscious. I mean, I've seen people get much more at home in their bodies at the end of palliative care. I don't want to kind of Pollyanna it because it doesn't always happen. But I have seen people change kind of fundamentally at that point because they've been put in a situation that's so different from an unconscious child, revisited an unconscious child experience. So there's something in that opportunity, and that can play off in other ways. I could talk for hours on this.
I think it's a very poignant example. So if we think about this in terms of ego states and hypothesize that person in their child is telling themselves, well, let's start with the parent, because the parent, that's the origin parent message is, you're disgusting. The child, then the child version is, I'm disgusting. And the integrating adult is, I can poo in my adult nappy, I can shit myself, and this nurse is completely accepting, and so on and so on. I'm not saying they even articulate it in that way. They have a positive new relational experience, which at some degree, however minute, melts or changes those messages. So without doing fancy sort of, reparenting or rechilding, they have that new experience. And I think I'm also, one of the things I think I've learned as 35 years, as a therapist, is the smallest thing is the biggest thing. It's like those little moments, is that moment of acceptance. Even if you go back to, oh my God, I'm terribly embarrassed and I'm disgusting and so on. That moment of relational encounter and acceptance and beauty and whatever, is that present-centered development, that newness, that neo-psychic experience. And that, I believe, I think, I know from myself and from some of my work, the melts, the atrophied archaic ego state, or the introjection and so on. And you may need to, of course, repeat it.
But it's also, I think, beyond the melting of the fixated. And then I'm just, from observation, is that then people say, I'm more than that. I'm more than my body. I mean, that's one of the, if people can get there, I'm more than that. And from experience, pain relief is needed less, various other things happen. I mean, it's not always magic, and I want to hold that as well. But there is something about the more than that. And that's when I think the self might be actually in the adult. The spiritual self, the fundamental self is in the adult.
I see it as a redecision in adult, as opposed to the redecision in child that the Gouldings talked about. But actually we're making a script redecision. I'm okay.
And from a co-creative perspective, we talk about CCTA being a narrative and based on constructivism. So I think what you were just talking about is, the way I'd look at it is that maybe non-consciously we generate a different story. We construct a different narrative, consciously or non-consciously, and that's what expands the adult and sort of quietens that that feeling of I'm disgusting or whatever. And I don't, you know, I've done quite a lot of work in terms of my past, and you know, I had a dad who just never showed any love, care, recognition, and we had a real problem as he grew old. And I've constructed a different story now than I had when I was a kid, which is that he did the best he could. He didn't know how to. Yeah, he did love, but he didn't know how to do it. He didn't know how to express it. So instead of having that resentment that I never had a dad, it's more about turning it round that he never had a son. You know, the story and that was his loss in a way. Yeah, and I'm really sad that he never knew me.
Yeah.
He never had the opportunity. So it's I mean, so a lot of that happened non-consciously, and then I became aware of it. So I think we construct a different narrative without knowing we're constructing a different narrative, and that's what expands the adult.
And I think I thank you, Paul. And I think I like that example, but I also think there's a body narrative. Well, because you know we talk, because narrative tends to say about words, but it's the body narrative, the movement when someone goes towards you, if you're covered in shit rather than repulse, and then I think you make the story that you then might come to the actual verbal realization, but it doesn't always have to happen.
No, I think that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I think it can happen non-consciously.
Yeah.
So we expand our adult without knowing why. Yeah. Consciously, but it's a not that defensiveness and that accounting happens in a non-conscious way.
Yeah.
I also like the pick up the theme in what you're saying just then, Jane, about we need the other. You know, we are not isolated individuals that can do everything for ourselves. And we do need another, you know, we have a relational need for the other sometimes to initiate, and that beautiful, that sort of sense of moving towards, and that is initiated by the other. Okay, it's maybe in response to the fact that, you know, you've got shit, you know, but it's still initiated rather than rejected, and then that maybe makes the difference. I remember asking a client what made a difference, and I was just conscious of being recorded then. I'll say one bit. He said that he was doing some barter. We did a barter arrangement for his therapy. So he did some gardening in exchange for therapy. And at one point I'd left him a postcard. And the postcard was of a film that he talked about in therapy. So on the back of the postcard, I said, you know, please do this or that, or, you know, whatever. And he said, the time you left me a postcard. And I said, oh yeah, I remember that. He said because what it said to me is that you'd thought about me outside of therapy when you'd gone shopping and seen the postcard or whatever and bought the postcard. You'd thought about me outside the therapy. That's what made one of the things he said was that's what made a difference. There was that sense of being born in mind, being outside the therapy in my own time, which he wasn't paying for. You know, all sorts of layers to that. And I think, I was just more and more persuaded by, you know, we need the other, and that doesn't necessarily a human other. It could be, you know, it could be the animal, the tree, the Helvellyn, Temonga, my mountain is Helvellyn. You know, it's that sort of connection, all of that. So thank you for sharing that, because I think it also presents that bit about, again, it's the we-ness, you know, healing comes in context and in relationship.
That was such a brilliant and fruitful, beautiful series of conversations. I'm really glad to have been here to hear it. And I'm really reluctant to bring something very prosaic and boring now in comparison. But I need to get this checked out because it's part of my training and development, and I don't feel I really got the answer that I asked for earlier, so I'm going to do it again. This is the model that I was thinking of. Can you see that?
Yeah.
And that I don't know that that was the one that was.
Oh, that's not Charlotte. No, that's somebody else.
So
Yeah.
who is this? Because I use this all the time. And the reason I use this is because the parent and the child, I feel, has been worked through. This is like my ideal of where we get to, because you've worked through your archaic stuff and you have decided. I talk about bringing the unconscious into the conscious and sorting through. What are we keeping? What are we getting rid of? What do we need to improve? What do we? And then whatever you keep as and integrate into yourself, you have full access to. And that's the way I see the place where I'd like to reach someday. But I don't know if that's the same as the integrating adult, or if I'm just drawing it differently in my head and I mean the same thing.
Well, so my question is, rather than saying whether I agree or not, which I will do, but what is useful? What is useful to you about having P2 and C2 within A2? What speaks to you about that? Given, if we're going for metaphors, making meaning and so on.
Yeah, it speaks to me of having full access to my resources. So if I've done my work and moved through my impasses, moved through my injunctions and worked out what my trauma and my archaic stuff. I mean, I'm not there yet. It's a long way to go, but this is my direction of travel. That therefore my A2, my integrating adult, will be able to have resource to these things to go, oh, hang on, it's like such and such, I can do that, or oh, I can do that, I've been there, or something like that, to strengthen my adult resources to enable me to be fully engaged, fully connected in my world.
And do you have P2 and C2 that sits outside A2? Do you have the bit that you're not connected with?
Well, I hadn't thought about that, but I think what I'm trying to say is this is the finished product.
That's the finished product, but so what's the work in progress?
Well, obviously I'm having to chug my way through my A2 and my C2 and my P2.
So my thought is that if you're work in progress, then you've got some P2 and some C2 that's unresolved that sits outside the A2. Yeah. So the complete diagram is still the three circles. So you've got P2, A2, including aspects of P2 and C2 that you draw on in terms of your resourcefulness, and then you've got C2, which is the stuff that's outside the A2.
So the resolved stuff in P and C would be within the integrating adult.
So I am just drawing it differently, but I'm happily doing the same. Oh, phew. And is this somebody's, or have I just made that up?
I think it's Ray Little. It rings a bell of Ray Little.
I'm sure I've seen it somewhere. I don't think I'm that clever. Ray Little. Thank you.
So your distinction, the distinction between the P2 in A2 and the P2 outside A2, in your definition, is about resourceful, resolved aspects that are then resourced and resourceable within your A2.
Yes, so it all becomes, it grows my ability to draw on things to strengthen me in the here and now for whatever it is I have to deal with.
Yeah. Great.
It just sounds like your adult has expanded.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Okay, doing the same thing. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Now I'll disagree with you.
Okay, great. Please do, because I'm writing.
I want to offer you a challenge. Is if I do get that it's useful, and so again, I go back to my. It's all good. If that's useful to you, that's your model, and I want to support that. And I supported it by just doing that little bit of, with you. My challenge is, it's about the nature of integration. That if you have integrated, in my understanding of integration, which is about holism and integrity, and we can have a whole conversation about what is the nature of integration or integrative. If you have integrated those aspects of P2 and C2 and they've become a resource, why why would they not be melted into and incorporated into the A2, the neo-psyche, rather than these sort of discrete bits within? It's almost like, well, I'll go and consult that bit of that A2 that's resourced there, and that's in my pocket. Well, maybe it's a pocket model. That could, like I've got pockets in my cardigan,
Well, at the conference, I did a lovely workshop with Jeff Hopping, and he did a model where he had perforated sides around the ego states for the thing that he was examining. And thinking about it, I guess what I've drawn is one stage, then the perforated stage, and then your stage is where we need to really get
nice. Okay. So this is the resourced stage, the resourcing myself stage.
Yeah.
And then there might be the perforated stage where it's even more integrated, and then they gradually disappear so that P2 dissolves into A2.
I'm liking this. Thank you very much.
Three-stage model of resourcing.
I'm going to use that with my clients. But I'm absolutely with you on yours. Thank you very much.
Great. I'm glad you hung in there for getting your needs met.
Offer something different. I've drawn a picture. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh.
That's how I see it.
Can you talk us through the words?
Yeah, talk us through.
Yeah, so your P you see is integrating. So this is in the process, this is your integrating adult, whereas these bits here, these are your unintegrated relational units.
Ah.
So that's how I diagram it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Thank you very much.
And I'm conscious that earlier on we talked about symbiosis, and I said I would find that model that I think Jane asked for. So if I can just quickly share the screen. So this is my other half, Debbie Robinson, and so she looks at healthy symbiosis being from an interdependent perspective, a weaness perspective. And if we're in the interdependence and weaness and co-creative, then we're using our integrating adults, and what we can do is share the responsibility in terms of who's taking most responsibility and putting most into the looking after bit. And it sort of works. It can work either way. So we're supporting each other without being dependent one way, or just constantly an unhealthy symbiosis when it's always one way. So
it sounds like it's inspired by that idea of the interpersonal field.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, you've referred to Debbie as your other half, and I guess that's I know it's a common phrase, but there's also something in that, isn't it, about feeling complete by with her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or could you talk about the symbiosis being the relational third?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think we've been doing some work in the co-creative TA group about what the heart. So if it's a 2.5 or 2+ therapy, then the plus bit, the half bit, comes from what's in the space. So instead of having a figure of 8, which I think Graham was talking about at the introduction at the conference, we've actually got like 3 circles in the middle that are overlapping. So we generate a field that becomes a resource that we can access. And we're probably going to do a workshop later on in the program on healthy symbiosis, and we may bring Debbie in to do that with us. Yeah. So Luke, watch out if you're interested. Watch out for that one, probably in September or something like that. And we'll bring Debbie in as a guest.
I'm aware of time and we're nearly we need to draw to a close. Sandra, I just want to check in with you. How have you found this? You've been listening more, and I know you said that you were probably going to take that position. My sense of you, but I just wanted to acknowledge your presence.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I've made copious notes. You've really prompted lots of thinking, and I do process at my own speed. I think that's what I will be doing over the next week or so, processing a lot of this. Actually, I loved Shadell. I valued you bringing that, because I've seen that too. I have it in my head. Where it's come from, I don't know, but you know, that idea of playing with how does that look. I mean, in one sense, we're talking about how we draw something that we're doing or being. So I try not to get too caught up with how we're drawing it.
And I think it's like Keith and Graham always, say it's what works for you. The metaphor that you have that you use, if it works, it's great. Yeah, it doesn't have to be this or that, or how do you see it, and does it help?
With respect, that's said from the position of someone who has the luxury of already passing their exams.
That's very true.
Well, I think you need to know, yes, I think that's true. But I also go back to that point about, I think, was it you, Monica, talking about the sort of parent, in TA, we do have some parent, interjected parent stuff in TA, like you've got to do it this way and you've got to quote that person and you've got that. And, actually the exam criteria are about you expressing yourself. I mean, yes, you did. If you quote somebody, you do need to know where the diagram comes from or how it works. But I think there's also an interest in you being yourself and you explaining how you work. Byrne talked about people turning up who were unqualified, by the way, at that stage, with a piece of theory and a diagram. That's why TA's got so many diagrams, because he was a visual, he promoted sort of that idea about visual, learning from sort of kinesthetic and visual learning. And certainly there are some of us in TA who promote, the idea of people co-creating their own theory. I think Jung talked about every client deserves a new theory. Why not every trainee deserves a new theory, deserves to have their theory, as long as you know where it comes from, who you're citing, and also why you're changing things. And yeah, so I would encourage you to do what basically to support you to do what you're doing.
Thank you.
So we're just about out of time. So
we close with a word, a sort of a little something from everybody, a word or an image or a gesture.
Thank you very much, and everybody. It's been a lot of food for thought, so thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Good to meet you.
I feel satisfied and content. Thank you.
Oh, great.
Thought-provoking and need time to digest.
Stimulating.
A smile on my face, and like Steph says, it's like satisfied and content. Thank you.
I'm buzzed up and excited, and thank you, all of you.
I'm enlivened. It's a great way to start the day. Or end the day for you, Keith.
Yeah, I was going to say, great way to end the day for me. Yeah.
Excited and hungry for more. Thank you, everyone.
I really enjoyed exploring tomato, and it's very, very interesting and very thought-provoking. It's really great.
And we've had a great session, not because Keith and I do it, because we do it, and you are here, and you've come to this, and it wouldn't be anywhere near as good and exciting and informative and a learning experience if you guys didn't contribute. So thank you for turning up and turning up.
That's lovely. Yes. So I'll say simply Paul Marie, which is good night from me, but also Ngā mihi ki o rā. So have a good day to you because you're beginning your days. So yeah, it's been great, and I've enjoyed staying together as a whole group. That to me that sort of worked, and yeah, I feel very enlivened, but pleasantly tired, but enlivened. I think I'll probably go and have a little debrief with my wife over a glass of wine.
Lovely.
May the 4th.
May the 4th.
Oh, that was yesterday, wasn't it? Or the day before.
Oh, May the 4th. Yeah. I've got my Yoda here, little Yoda. And it's my Yoda soap. It's my Yoda soap made by my son's partner.
Wow.
Very nice. Half a year. Yes. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul and Keith.
Bye.